Hi there, everybody. Welcome to Courtroom Insider. It is Friday, November 14th, 2025. I'm Nate Eaton. It is so good to be with you tonight. We have a really interesting conversation coming up here and a really exciting announcement. I got to tell you, I think you're going to be excited if you're a longtime viewer of Courtroom Insider. I'm going to tell you in a minute. One of the most requested guests from you to me, asking me to have them come on to Courtroom Insider, it's happening. It's happening. And I'll tell you about it in just a little bit. First, I got to tell you, it's nice to be back. I got really sick over the weekend. Erica was sick last week. And I rarely get sick. And I got sick. We had a reporter press club Idaho training on Saturday at the Museum of Idaho in Idaho Falls, and I went there kind of feeling a little off, just not much of an appetite. Stomach felt a little odd. When I got home, my goodness, it hit me like a truck, to the point I've never been so dehydrated and nauseated, vomiting, all that my legs and my feet were cramping up. I got a little nervous. I realize now, I needed my electrolytes, but the good news is I'm feeling much better. A little bug went around the house with the rest of the kids this past week. So Erica did an incredible job yesterday disinfecting the entire house, washed every blanket, sheet, towel. Anyway, we have a clean house and just in time for the weekend. Hope you are ready for the weekend. We have a couple things to talk about tonight. Before we get to the guest, the Zion Society. Going to be honest, hadn't heard of this. I heard a little bit about it, and I grew up in Utah. Mike King is here. He is one of the lead investigators on this entire cult, Northern Utah thing that happened. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then, as I mentioned, I have a big announcement. I want to, before we get going, though, yesterday was the anniversary of the tragic, I hate saying anniversary because it sounds like it's a celebratory occasion. It's not. It was 3 years since these four beautiful University of Idaho students were killed. Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Kayla Gonzalez, and Madison Mogan were tragically killed November 13th, 2022. I can't believe it's been 3 years. I remember the morning that happened, we got a vague news release from the police department up there saying that 4 students had been found dead. And immediately you think, was it carbon monoxide? What was it? And now we know just how horrible it was. And there actually is a little bit of news in the case that I wanted to go over with you tonight, just because we covered this. Remember how we talked last week about the restitution and whether more restitution will be paid to the victims for funeral expenses and whatnot. Well, Judge Hippler, just yesterday on the anniversary of their deaths, issued a ruling. I have it here on my screen. Let me pull it up for you. Before the court is the state's request for restitution for funeral expenses incurred by the parents of Kayla Gonzalez and Madison Mogan. The state requests $1,420 in favor of Steve and Christy Gonzalez and $1,587 for Karami Laramie for expenditures made for urines. An itemized statement with receipts was provided. Although defendant agrees that the plea agreement allows for these expenses to be sought as restitution, he argues the request should be denied based on his inability to pay. Then the judge goes through the standard. This isn't a very long brief, by the way. The analysis, he talks about case law, about the plea agreement. Reading through the plea agreement, he says the plea agreement at issue provides that the state may seek restitution orders regarding funeral expenses and crime victims' compensation reimbursement in the amount to be determined. There's no dispute that the expenses incurred for the urns are funeral expenses as contemplated by the plea agreement. The dispute is whether the defendant agreed to pay restitution for the funeral expenses, or as requested by the state, or only after the court considers the factors set forth. The defendant argues it is the latter. The court finds the former to only be a reasonable interpretation of the plea agreement. If the parties intended that restitution only be ordered in the amounts determined by the court, there would be no reason to include the restitution provision in the plea agreement. Kind of goes into the weeds here about what it is. Then we go on to hear that defendant argues that restitution for funeral expenses should not be ordered given his other financial obligations associated with the case, his inability to pay. He argues his consecutive life sentences preclude him from earning, though employment, through employment, I think that means, and prevents him from profiting from the crime by way of a book, movie, or entertainment. The state responds that although the defendant may not be able to earn money during his sentence, it is not a basis to deny restitution, particularly here, where defendant has received significant financial contributions while incarcerated. The state further argues that any money that would otherwise be paid to defendant for future media contracts can be collected by the state treasurer to be placed in an escrow account to pay restitution orders recovered as civil judgment. The economic losses sought by the Gonzalez and Miss Laramie for funeral expenses total $3,000. This is in addition to the criminal fines and fees of $251,227.50, a civil judgment of $20,000 for each family, and the $31,000 in restitution orders defendant stipulated to the crime victims' compensation and the families of Xana Kernodle and Ethan Chapin. A lot of numbers here. So this is the interesting part, I think, one of the interesting parts that Judge Hippler says, is the amount at issue represents a minimal additional burden on the defendant's financial obligations in connection to the case. $3,000, just asking for an extra $3,000 out of all of these other money. Further, he has received nearly enough through donations to cover the amount of restitutions already ordered. You get that? Restitution already ordered is nearly $32,000. And Judge Hippler is saying he's already received nearly that amount in donations to him from people out there watching. So he can pay the restitutions. Now, will he get $250,000? I don't know. I bet that guy in New York, Luigi Mangione, I bet he's got it because people are throwing money at him left and right. While these funds, Judge Hippler goes on to say, may no longer be available to the defendant, it is foreseeable he will continue to receive donations in the future, particularly given the amount donated, much of the donated amounts came from his family. In addition, there's no reason the defendant cannot secure prison employment for remuneration. Given his limited needs in prisons and his youth, it is foreseeable that through employment and donations, defendant may receive significant amounts over his life to at least come close to meeting his financial restitution obligations. The amount in the footnote, the judge says that the defendant received several hundred donations totaling $28,360. $28,360 is what Kohberger was given while incarcerated in Latah and Ada County jails. And most of those donations came from his family. The judge goes on to say, the court finds the language of the plea agreement obligates the defendant to make restitution, and he has been ordered to pay $1,420 to the Gonzalez family, $1,587 for the urines to Miss Laramie. So that resolves that issue. He'll have to add a $3,000 to his thing and owe it to the families. I know some of you reached out to me saying, how do you send inmates money? It's actually quite simple. Each of them has an account. In the state of Idaho, they use an app called JPay, I believe. No, Getting Out. They use JPay in Arizona, where Lori was. I have both of them on my phone because I've communicated with inmates. And you put like $20 on their account, and then they can use it for commissary. And that's what they can use it for: commissary, communication. They can use it to download music on their tablet, and they can earn money, as was mentioned. And it sounds like Judge Hippler is saying that Kohberger is young enough. He's got plenty of time ahead of him, his whole life. He could get a job. Are they going to let him out in general population to go start cleaning toilets and mopping the floors? At this point, I don't think so. Maybe in a few years. And maybe there is some sort of job he can do in private. But I bet that's being evaluated as time goes forward. So there is the ruling from Judge Hippler. Now, I want to transition over to a guy named Arvin Shreve. Ever heard of him? Let me tell you a little bit about him. Arvin Shreve was a lifelong resident of Weber County, which is in Utah, about 45 minutes north of Salt Lake City. So from where I'm at, about 2.5 hours away from Idaho Falls. He was employed as a landscaper for the city of Ogden. He had been excommunicated from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints for advocating practices not consistent with church teachings. He began a cult called The Company that recruited mostly excommunicated LDS members. About 70 people joined, and they all lived in the same neighborhood. The group believed that all female members should engage in same-sex relationships to prove her spirituality. Men were assigned 2 or more females between 4 and 60 who formed sister councils. The council ran every aspect of the women's lives from diet to finances. Shreve's council had 28 women who accepted him as their eternal male companion. Ron Van Drimmelen, whose ex-wife was part of the cult, hired an investigator to infiltrate the group and gather information. He had video and photographic evidence of abuse happening in the group. In 1991, the police raided 7 of the members' homes and arrested 11 members for the use of pornographic material for instructional purposes and sexual exploitation of a child. Shreve was arrested a week later. 9 children were taken into protective custody as they couldn't be entrusted to their mother's care. Shreve, before we get there, let me tell you about the Zion Society. A small, secretive, and deviant polygamous cult that operated in northern Utah during the 1980s and the early 90s, led by Arvin Shreve. The group was known for committing severe crimes, including sexual abuse and exploitation of women and children. Arvin Shreve, an excommunicated LDS member, proclaimed himself a prophet of God. He worked as a landscaper, and the homes of his followers were noted for their immaculate yards. The group, also called the Company, so interchangeably the Company and the Zion Society, practiced polygamy and developed a twisted doctrine that involved the sexual abuse of children and total control over members' lives. Females were reportedly required to engage in same-sex relationships. The group also stockpiled weapons in line with doomsday beliefs. The cult lived in one single quiet neighborhood in Ogden, Utah, and was largely hiding in plain sight. The group's activities came to light after a brave member left and confessed to authorities. You'll hear about that in a moment. In 1991, police conducted the raids. Shreve ended up pleading guilty to multiple counts of sodomy and sexual abuse. He died in prison in 2009. The story of the investigation and the victim's experiences have been documented in the memoir Deceived, an investigative memoir of the Zion Cult Society by the lead detective Mike King, and in various true crime podcasts, such as one coming out very soon, Gardens of Evil, Inside the Zion Society Cult. Mike King is putting out a podcast detailing all of this. It comes out in 2 months, February. But I heard all about this. I've been wanting to talk to Mike about this, and he's here tonight. So, and one caveat, I had 30 minutes of time to do this with Mike. I wish I had booked 2 hours with him because I felt like we had just got going, and not that this is, I wish I could have had him on for 5 hours to talk about this, and we will. I'll have him back, but this is just kind of anyway, let me go to the interview. We'll talk about more after. Here is Mike King. He is the host of Profiling Evil on YouTube. He's been to CrimeCon. You've seen him there before. I've actually interviewed him at CrimeCon. I played that interview a couple of months ago. But here is Mike King to talk more about this cult. Mike, so good to see you again. We chatted at CrimeCon a little bit, and I knew that I wanted to have you back. Can you give us just a Reader's Digest version of your background for people that may not have experienced your work or watched your channel?
Certainly, and thanks so much, Nate. I just love your work, and I love being able to hang out with you. I started a law enforcement career a long time ago. I ended up doing about 28 years total over the course of my career. I served as a patrol officer in the city of Ogden, Utah. It's a city of about 85,000, 90,000 people. We had about 160 police officers at the time, so we were able to really enjoy all the aspects of law enforcement. I worked patrol for a number of years, and during that time was promoted and given an opportunity to serve on the SWAT team, which I served on for about 6 years. and then went into investigations. During the time I was in investigations, I actually ended up investigating a homicide case where I got a confession from a woman, and after the confession, she said to me, "Hey, maybe you should tell my attorney that I've been talking to you," which I was happy to do. And I called her attorney, and he freaked out and said, "Don't talk to her anymore." And I said, "Yeah, no problem. I've already got everything I need." Well, he ultimately became the county attorney, and the day he became county attorney and was voted in, he actually called me on the phone and asked me if I'd come over and work in investigations in the county attorney's office.
Mm.
And that, of course, launched into a career that ended up doing cults primarily. That then took me to the attorney general's office when the state of Utah in the early 90s put a bucket load of money into investigating ritual crime across the state. It was at the time an era when we were having the satanic panic era kind of stuff going on. And so I worked with that task force and was eventually promoted to chief in the Attorney General's office, and then eventually promoted to chief of staff for the office, working directly for the Attorney General, which was just a wonderful career. And throughout that opportunity, was trained by FBI profilers in this kind of art and science of profiling. And then after the 2002 Winter Olympics, where I served in the Olympic Intelligence Command, I took a opportunity to retire, and I went to work for Esri, which is a global GIS or mapping company, and led as part of a team the law enforcement and emergency communication 911 solutions worldwide for them. And I did that for about 17 years before finally saying it's time for me just to focus on profiling evil.
Which is your channel. Profiling evil. I think you've seen a lot of evil over your career. Is there
sadly
one?
so.
I don't want to focus on that, but is there one particular case situation that really would you say is the worst of the worst, and how dealing with that, investigating it, did you cope with it mentally so that you didn't have it consume you?
Oh, wow. I've talked about the Zion Society many times. I mean, I handled so many serial predators. It's hard to say who is the ugliest, but I think I really go back to the Zion Society investigation, Nate, because the focus was primarily children. And, I mean, seeing people victimized regardless is looking into the eyes of evil. But in the case of Arvin Shreve and the Zion Society, where he purposely focused his entire cult, his religion, everything else on sexuality and predatory sexuality that evolved into child sexual abuse. And we're talking children from ages 2 years old on up. That was something that was so impactful on me. Had I not had a faith system and the ability to counsel with faith leaders and find balance in my life, it could have been absolutely consuming. But thankfully, because I did have balance, I was able to work through that. And I remember I was actually working as part of a team of officers with the Harvard School of Medicine on psychiatry and the law. And I remember Dr. Harold Birchstand sitting down with me one day, and I was feeling a little overwhelmed with all of this garbage. And he said, the secret is to advocate for people and not allow their pain to become your pain. You can advocate, you can empathize, but it's their pain to bear, and your job is to advocate for them. It changed my whole way of looking at life, actually.
That's a really good point. Yeah, advocate, but don't let it consume you. So could you give us a little bit of background, Mike, about how you found out about that case? I mean, did one whistleblower come forward or one victim, and where did it start and where did it ultimately end?
So I was having the time of my life. I was working with a task force of officers, and we were buying stolen cars, and we were working our way up a chain in a chop shop organization, and I mean, it was just really fun police work, and the kind of police work you liked, where you got to be with knuckle draggers and go out and kick doors in and have a lot of fun and crunch crime. And one day I walked into the Attorney General's office preparing for a task force meeting. And the receptionist cornered me and said, "Hey, I've got a woman sitting over here in the lobby that's been waiting to talk to an investigator, but I don't have anybody available. Can you talk with her for a minute and get her story?" So I was kind of the lowest rung on the ladder, Nate, and I walked over and introduced myself, and it was a beautiful 21-year-old girl with jet black hair, and she stood up so confidently, and she looked at me in the eyes. She shook my hand. She said, "Hey, I'm involved in a cult that's sexually abusing children. Do you have a minute to talk to me?" And
Mm,
I mean, you try to act like you hear this stuff every day, but I took her back into the office and she started to unfold what she had been involved in. And she took an incredible amount of risk because she was involved to where she should have been charged criminally. We decided not to charge her because she did come forward and was so influential in what happened, and obviously had a conscience that said, "I got to rid myself of this." But that was where it all started. And when I tried to pawn that case off on other investigators who were better equipped to handle it, the county attorney said, "No, you've established the relationship. You are no longer running a task force looking at stolen cars. You're now a sex crimes investigator." And I received my baptism by fire because it was literally thousands of counts of child sexual rape and assault that we ended up logging in that investigation, ultimately arresting 12 people and convicting all 12.
mm.
And there should have been many more out of that group of 130 plus people that should have gone to prison. But after 2 years of putting children through the process of having to testify over and over again, we made a conscious decision that their mental health was more important and that we needed to get them on the road to recovery.
Right. So do you know, has that group dissolved?
So the interesting thing is I continued as I went into ritual crime. Of course, I was following all of the polygamous groups in the state of Utah. This was a group of excommunicated Latter-day Saints. So they had been given the harshest punishment that the Latter-day Saint faith could give by exiling them from their roles in the membership. But they continued to practice kind of their own form of wacky polygamy, which really involved the women having sexual relations with each other and then everyone having sexual relations with these children that were in the group. And there were 32 children that we
Yeah.
rescued as a result of that case. And so I watched the members of that group who you walk away from a case like that. When we did bust day, Nate, we had 70 plus police officers when we hit the compound. It was a massive undertaking, and we hit 14 homes at once in order to take this group down. And so over the years, I kept thinking, well, we've solved the problem. We've crushed this, and we've cut off the head of the snake by putting the self-proclaimed prophet in prison. But in reality, people that join these cults oftentimes are really looking for somebody to control every aspect of their life. And most of them just went on to look at other cults and other kind of idealized groups that had the same kind of thought processes. So I would run into them from time to time as I investigated other cults across the state. And that always led to some interesting exchanges on the street.
Right. How would you define a cult?
Well, I think it's important when we talk about cults, and I like to lean on the experts who have become dear friends of mine, the Yanya Lalich's, the Rick Ross's, the Stephen Hassan's. I think they really have the handle when they say we have to divide cult into two categories because I live in Utah. We have the Utah Jazz. Jazz fans are cult members, whether
Right.
they want to admit it or not. They wear
Right.
paraphernalia that looks like it. They yell jazz. They talk jazz. All they think about is the jazz. That's a legitimate kind of a cult, using a really coarse word for them.
Right.
So what we really want to focus on are the coercive control groups, the people where oftentimes there's a single leader or one or two leaders. The Daybells would be a perfect example, where everything points back toward them. Everything is about them. The ideology is built on them being a god or a goddess or the one who's in tune, the one who makes decisions, the one that everyone yields to, versus legitimate kinds of religions, mainstream religions, I like to kind of think of, where their focus is more outward. They're more transparent. They talk about a God that they believe in, or they talk about enriching and encouraging and growing the human family. Where a cult, a coercive cult, and a coercive cult leader is all about what's in it for me. What am I going to gain? What am I going to do? How am I going to become better, more powerful? And that to me is the definitional difference.
Yeah. I wonder if after you did that massive case, got all those arrests, were able to bring some finality to it, even though you weren't able to arrest everybody else, but to protect the children from testifying. Was it, what did you feel? I mean, you had just spent all this time, all this effort, all this energy. Was it a sigh of relief, or was it more like, oh, I wish we could have done more?
Yeah, you absolutely wish you could have done more, but you really walk away kind of patting yourself on the back, thinking, I did something really big and really substantial here. And what I found for me personally, Nate, was that we did everything that we could possibly do. The courts, I think, did everything at the time that they could possibly do. They required counseling for the children. They sadly, because most of these children were being victimized by people who were their parents or caretakers or others, the children were returned to the same environment. And we walked away thinking we did a great job. And it wasn't until 30 years later when two of the victims or survivors of the Zion Society reached out to me as 45-year-old women and said, Hey, I need to talk to you because I'm having memories that I can't reconcile. And my family and everyone around me is telling me I'm making it all up. Can you talk to me about this? And it wasn't until we brought during COVID those kids together and
Mm,
we put them on a Zoom call, and it was like watching a whole batch of sailors. They hadn't seen each other in 30 years,
mm,
talking about their experiences and validating their memories and crying when someone mentioned, I remember curling your hair in the mornings and I burnt you with a curling iron.
mm.
And another child, just a 45-year-old child now, breaking down in tears saying, I remember that. And that experience was absolutely incredible. But during that experience, I learned that we failed those kids in three primary ways. One is that the state said you will have mandatory counseling, but they turned them back to their parents who said this wasn't that big a deal.
Mm.
Number two was these kids were homeschooled and they were matriculated back into the education system at age 15, 16, 17, and almost all of them dropped out of school and ended up working hourly jobs the rest of their lives until we had met because they never had a formal education. They never fit in. They never matriculated. They never learned social skills. All they knew was how to read scriptures and how to do sex acts. And so we failed in that regard. And and we failed in not acknowledging and giving them a voice. And so I vowed that that was going to change. And I reached out to the county attorney at the time. His name was Reed Richards. And we reached out to the governor's office. And after a bunch of negotiation, the state came back and agreed to pay for counseling for these kids, 45-year-old people now,
Wow.
30 years later. The state victims reparations group stepped right in. I reached out to Brad Mortensen, the president of Weber State University, and I said, these kids don't have an education. Brad was just appointed, as you may know, as Utah State University president.
And he's from Rexburg, Idaho, right down the street from me, where we are.
Isn't that crazy? Well,
Yeah.
President Mortensen stepped up and he said to those kids, whether it's a GED or a PhD, we're going to help you get it. And we're now seeing these kids at 45. One
Wow.
just got her master's degree. And because Dr. Phil said you're going to do it, and I didn't plan on it, we ended up writing a book and we gave the kids a voice through the book. And we have a brand new podcast called Gardens of Evil that's going to drop with Gamut Podcast Network on February 3rd, where their
Wow.
story will finally be told in a big way. So we I guess kind of came full circle and thought, while we patted ourselves on the back with a limited amount of knowledge then, that 30 years taught us that there is an incredible amount of work that needs to continue to happen for victims of crime long after the fact. And for all the wonderful people that bought my book, Deceived, which was written about those kids' journey, we were able to use the proceeds from that to help fund a brand new children's advocacy center that opened in May in Utah. And last month, Nate, we were so excited because we were able to take some of the additional money that we've gotten, and we announced a King Family Endowment Scholarship for Criminal Justice at Weber State University.
Incredible.
And it's thanks to all the people that just stepped up and bought books and supported us at Profiling Evil.
It is so nice to hear that because, so often in my job, we cover the crime, we cover the trial. You hear a little bit from the victims. They might be willing to do an interview with you, but normally once the trial's over, we kind of move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And you don't think about that, okay, for them, the trial's over, but they've got the next year, the birthday, the Christmas, they've got the next 10 years, the next 20 years. So to hear that this was a decades long process still unfolding now, and that there's all these good things happening, it's pretty impressive. Mike, normally when people turn around 60, 62, 65, they might retire. They might go golf or go up to the cabin in the mountains. It seems like you're just getting busier.
It's the craziest thing. My boss at Esri, his name's Jack Dangermond, and he is probably one of the wealthiest people in the world. In fact, he just donated about 150 miles of California coastline to the Nature Conservancy. Jack said to me one day, "You can rest when you're dead," because I was complaining about being tired.
Yeah.
I think it's just redefine and find your passion. And right now, my passion is that I get a little bit nervous in the true crime community because I feel like there are a bunch of people spinning conspiracy theories rather than talking about what we know factually in cases. And that's the other reason why I continue to try to do Profiling Evil, is I just try to talk about the balance in these investigations, that sometimes people do really evil things, but they may not be that bad of a person in other circumstances. I think about kids who are addicted to drugs and they end up committing horrible crimes trying to feed that drug addiction. And I remember a police chief I worked with that said to a mother of a kid who had gone through that, that isn't your son anymore. That's someone who made some bad choices that created this monster that they've become. And I just hope that we do a little better job of kind of thinking a little more factually instead of emotionally. And you and I have had the chance to talk to police officers in major conferences about that very topic of finding the balance in how you reveal information that you receive. And so I guess that's kind of why I keep going.
Good for you, because we need more fact-based, not speculation, not sensational type of coverage of these things to not only inform, but to educate, which is what you're doing. Yeah. I hate to say it, Mike, but I have to run, but I want you back to talk. We didn't even talk about FLDS, you sleeping in Warren Jeff's house. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We have a whole nother chapter. So that's a big tease. We're going to have Mike
I'm looking forward to it
very soon before the end of the year. Mike, you can find him Profiling Evil on YouTube. And then the name of the book is Deceived. Is that other book out, or is that coming out in February?
Yes. Wolves in Sheep's Clothing is out, and it's built for the true crime enthusiast to look at criminal behavior and try to get a little better handle on how to do their own decision making, which I think is really important in this world. And I think you'd really like Wolves in Sheep's Clothing. I got to get you a copy, Nate.
I'd love to read it. And for those of you looking for holiday gifts, that sounds like it's the perfect thing. Mike, where's your website?
Profilingevil.com, or anything with the @ Profiling Evil will help you find us. And
Thank
Nate,
you.
thanks so much. Thanks for the way you handle things.
Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mike. See, I told you I wish I had more time with Mike. He's such a great interviewer, such a great host of his podcast. You can find him, of course, as he mentioned there, on his YouTube. And I will have him back to talk more about Warren Jeffs and Colts in general. It's fascinating to do this discussion. I know so many of you and so many with the whole Daybell stuff often ask me, do you think it was really a cult? Do you think they were really in a cult? And the way I think about cults is the story he was just telling me about. There's dozens of members and they all live in the same neighborhood and they all dress and look and act the same. And so one person is isolating them from everybody else. Maybe Chad and Lori were getting there. I mean, there were definitely cultish aspects for sure. And I just don't know how big of a full-on cult it was. Regardless, it's not healthy. It's not good. And Mike, I cannot wait for this podcast to come out because it's going to be a fascinating thing. It's always interesting to go back. Can you imagine if you're living in this neighborhood and suddenly the cops show up and there's like 10 homes that they're raiding and you find out that all of these neighbors were in this weird sexual cult doing weird, crazy stuff and abusing children, and it's just wild. It's wild. So anyway, I know you've been hanging out. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike, for coming on. We'll have you back. I have my announcement. It's still coming up. It's coming up. Okay, stay with me. Before we get to that, though, I have to thank newspapers.com. They are our sponsor. They've been a great sponsor. Just now, as I was playing that interview of Mike King, I went to newspapers.com. I typed in Arvin Shreve, and look at this. Purported polygamous patriarch booked. This was from the Times News. Twin Falls, Idaho, August 11th, 91. Purported Northern Utah polygamous leader Arvin Shreve was booked into the Weber County Jail early Saturday on charges of aggravated sexual assault and sodomy on a child. Shreve turned himself into police in the southern Utah community of Cedar City on Friday after warrants for his arrest were issued earlier in the week. Ogden Police Detective David Lucas and County Prosecutor Mike King, there's his name, went to Cedar City to question Shreve and bring him back to face charges in Ogden. As the car containing the trio arrived at the Weber County Jail, it jumped the curb and drove about 100 feet on the sidewalk and edged its way through a group of reporters stopping in front of the jail entrance. Wow, I don't know what happened there. That's a perp walk, as we say in the media. Shreve was hustled inside, booked around 12:45 a.m. Bell hearing was set. Let's get there. Shreve said he tried to get back to Ogden, but could only get a ride as far as Cedar City. The judge issued 4 warrants. Anyway, if you want to do a deep dive into this, newspapers.com. I typed in his name, Arvin Shreve. Of course, over here you can see the map. Utah, there's 458 articles on newspapers.com. There's some in California. You can go through it all. There's 1,194 matches with just Arvin Shreve's name. And if I type in Zion Society, whoops, I added a U, 7 million. Yeah, you're going to have to filter that out because there's a lot. Anyway, newspapers.com, phenomenal resource. And just a big thanks to them for sponsoring and helping Courtroom Insider out and being a big supporter of us and our journalism here. Okay, before we get to my announcement as far as an episode we have next week on Courtroom Insider, I want to show you guys what came in. If you follow me on Facebook, you're aware of this. Where is it? There we go. Look what we have. Don't worry, I'm just here for the evidence. We've got these t-shirts, sweatshirts, and hoodies on sale now in my hands. Phenomenal gifts for Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, New Year's, Thanksgiving. You can all wear these around the table. Also, we've got this one, which I love. Alex, our graphic designer, came up with these, and I think he did a great job. Staying home, solving crimes again. We've got these. We've got Secret Santa shirts, brand new. Here's the deal. We use a third-party store that I've referred to you before. If you're watching it outside of America, you have to order through there. I'm sorry, we can't ship to you directly from here. If you're watching in the United States and you want one of these, we had ordered 5 to 10 of each size, each style, and that's it. So there's less than 10 now. Some of them there's 0. We sold out of certain styles and sizes that me personally, I'm shipping. Before I came in here to do Courtroom Insider, I was packaging up shirts, writing names. And if you want, I will include a little note to a friend, to your mom, to your grandma, whatever. Just say, hey, it's not long because my hand would fall asleep. But I'm happy to personalize it because I love you all so much. I truly do. And you can order these by going to eastidahonews.com/shop. Let me show you how this works because lots of you have asked questions. eastidahonews.com/shop. What you need to do is order these through this part of the store. Don't click on, if you're outside of America, click on this part, this top part, merch website. That's where you can get all our stuff. Down here is the holiday store. Believe in the secret of giving. It's a Secret Santa. Staying home, solving crimes again. I'm just here for the evidence. And our mugshot shirt, we're getting some more of those too. Then we have last year's Secret Santa stuff too. You click through here. What you can do is, let's say you want this evidence sweatshirt. Go through here, choose your size. Like if I wanted a large, we have those in stock as of now. XL we have in stock, 2XL, 3XL. Looks like we're out of mediums and smalls. Click large, add to cart. When you go to check out, you pay with this link. Oh, I don't know what that is. We must have changed. Oh no. We must have changed. It works, I promise you. I just have never bought something through our store. There's a field that you can type in, Nate, please leave a note for my Aunt Sally. And I'll be happy to leave a note for your Aunt Sally. Do that, and we'll get them to you, and yeah, you'll have a good Christmas. And if you're going on the cruise, sorry, I got to get all the housekeeping items out of the way. Don't you love that I'm prolonging this announcement? You're gonna love it. Let's see, CrimeCon, the cruise. If you're thinking about the cruise next November, the prices go up on Tuesday. So if you want to do the cruise, I would suggest you book it this weekend. And you don't have to pay for it all up front. If you can do installment payments. It is November 18th through the 22nd, 2026. So a year from now. Fort Lauderdale, Cozumel, Mexico on the Celebrity Beyond ship. And you can book. I'm going to be there with Erica. Chris Hansen's going to be there. They have several other speakers and presenters they haven't announced, and I've heard who some of them are. I'm excited. I'm super excited. And here's the deal. If you use the promo code EATON, EATON, then you can get a 10% off discount on a standard badge. So you save like $30-40 right there. And you can use that code, by the way, if you're going to Vegas, CrimeCon in May. EATON, that'll give you 10% off. So go to crimecon.com. I just want to let you know, because many of you have written me about the cruise. If you want the best price, it's not going to get any cheaper before Tuesday. November 18th, prices go up. And you can book now, put down a deposit, then make your payments before, and you have a year to do it. And you're good to go. So that should be exciting. And one other thing before we go about CrimeCon, before the announcement, just dragging it on. Well, I'll hold that thought for next week. Here's what's coming up next week. I'm just going to show you a picture, okay? In fact, I'll zoom in on the picture. Okay. Look, that's me, and I'm wearing the same shirt here and there. Who do you think that guest is in the chair? Any idea? Why don't I zoom out a little? Recognize that person? Let me show you one more picture. I'll make it full. I'll zoom in again. Except I can't, or all you'll see is our legs. Next week on Courtroom Insider, me and this guy, one-on-one. Don't miss it. Probably Monday, maybe Tuesday. I'm hoping for Monday. Again, Courtroom Insider, next week, one-on-one with Judge Justin Boreski. Thank you all for watching tonight. I hope you have an incredible weekend. See you next week.